So it's lesson 8. We've built our shared header with Bootstrap. The only other thing we should implement in it is very easily we should enable the JavaScript that makes this menu mobile responsive. So we actually already have the file we need. When we downloaded Bootstrap about a month ago, and we extracted it, we got a CSS folder. So we're using the minified version of the CSS. We can see it in our header on line 6. But it also includes Bootstrap JavaScript library. So this library contains the functions for the Bootstrap animations that are supported by the classes. So we can just link to the minified JavaScript file in our header. So I'm going to add a JavaScript link, and our source will be our JS folder. And I'll just link to the minified Bootstrap. So if I refresh, once I add this link, my little mobile responsive navigation should work. So I'll refresh. And now when I shrink to mobile view, we get our little, so you can kind of see the power of leveraging Bootstrap. Right? It would take us a lot of time to write the CSS and JavaScript to make this. Or at least it would take me a long time. So I'm going to just leverage Bootstrap instead for this. So now we got a mobile friendly menu simply by including the Bootstrap JavaScript that we downloaded. Right? So this would be something like a phone scale, for example. So our site's sort of starting to come together now. We could also do a shared footer, simple footer. I'm going to leave that out for today. But there is one other element for efficiency where we've duplicated, we've repeated ourselves over and over again in this site, that we would be probably well served to move into a single file that we can share. What code have we replicated in many different pages in our website that would be much more efficient to put into a single file? What's the line of code you hate typing out the most in this project? Thank you, David. The database connection. Right. So we have used the database connection on our games page, on our details page, on our save page, as well as on our delete page. So this is really inefficient. It's time consuming to code. It's error prone. And sometimes we have to change our connections. Maybe we move our website from one server to another. Maybe our site is compromised and we have to reset the database credentials. Or somebody who works on our team leaves the team and should no longer have access to the database. So again, we're going to want to reset the password. We don't want to go into every page when this happens and redo the credentials. So we're going to make a database file, and we're going to replace any of the calls to the database with an include. So you go to back to my folder. I'm going to make a new PHP file. We'll give it a nice, short, simple name. We'll just call it db.php. So it's going to be super simple and easy to include on any pages that are going to work with the database. So we'll create db.php. We can take out all the HTML here. This is just a code-only file. There's no HTML output. So we'll just put in a set of PHP tags. Now I'm going to cut and paste the database connection. We'll just go to my games file. So I have it here on line 10. So I'm going to cut that database connection and I'll paste it in here. And we'll save our db.php. So just move your connection where we're creating this variable called db. For now, this is the only line of code. Later on, we'll need one more line. And now in my games, I'm just going to replace it with the simple include db. Pardon me. And our db variable is now declared here, but it's still shared and available. My code editor doesn't like it because now it says, well, wait a minute, I don't recognize this db. That's okay. The db variable is now in our include file. So if I go back to the browser and refresh my games page, it should still work perfectly, even though I've moved the database connection into an include file. So I'm going to go back, click on games, page still loads. Now we've got, I think, 5 other pages in our site that are all using the database connection. So I want to replace the database connection. I'm just going to copy that include line. And I'm going to open up each one of the individual files that are using our database connection. So I'm going to go to our delete game page. I'm going to take out my database connection and I'm just going to include our database file instead. So that's in our delete. In our game details, I think we actually have the connection twice. We have it near the top of the file on line 11 in the instance that we're editing an existing game. So I'm just going to, again, replace the connection line with my include. We have the database connection down below on this page as well in the code that fills the publisher's dropdown. So I've replaced line 11. If I scroll down inside my select tag, here it's on line 49, here's the connection again. So once again, I'll use my include file here. We've got it on our save game page as well. So here on line 48, if our form inputs are valid, we're connecting to the database. So we will no longer have to retype the database connection. It lives in our db.php file. We also we created publisher details and save publisher. I guess we could update it there as well. I guess we don't have it on publisher details. On save publisher, we're connecting. If you want, we could change it here too. We don't really use this page much. And I'll just verify that I can still add, edit, and delete games, that my include file didn't break anything. So I'll add a new game. My dropdown's still working. So yeah, I can add a game. I can edit a game. And I can delete. All these pages are still working. Third, somebody have a question? No problem, Tanya. It's okay. Lets me know you're still there. So now if we have to change anything in our database connection, there's just a single file for it. So that's basically all there is to using include or require. We're going to make a new file. We use include or require to embed that file. Maybe the file is code only, like our database connection. Maybe it is a combination of HTML and PHP, or it might just be plain old HTML. We didn't make a footer file, but we could do an embed, include the footer at the bottom. Maybe we'll do that another day. Does anybody have any questions about using include for sharing components before we just move in and spend the rest of our time implementing some error handling? So let's think for a minute about what kinds of things can go wrong in our web applications when we publish them. What are some typical things that might cause errors? We looked at one already early in the class. What are some common problems? What happened with the Ontario vaccine booking site on the first day they launched it on Monday? Okay, Chris, that's a good point. We could have a typo. Maybe, David, possibly, if it would potentially corrupt our database. So yeah, Chris, we're going to simulate a typo. We'll create a typo error. That's one. So typo in our code. So bad input. So inputs from users. What other things could go wrong? What kind of error did I generate? Okay, yeah. So what if we've got connectivity problems? Either too many people or right, what if, let's say, our database server is getting rebooted, right? So I don't have access to my database right now, right? This page is going to try to connect so it can run a query. Well, that's interesting. Let's try that in a private window. I think it's caching the result. So sometimes our database, for whatever reason, doesn't connect. Sometimes we might have typos in our code. Sometimes users may enter data that crashes things. So all of these, and then the most common error, right? So we get this. So what should happen in this case? Should we show this to users? This is actually really dangerous. Why is this dangerous? Right? So I tried to connect to the database, but for whatever reason, it failed. In this case, it failed because I'm not on the VPN. But sometimes, servers go down or have to be rebooted. What's the problem with this response? Exactly. Thank you, David. It says connection failed attempt, but then it shows my username and password and the source code. Incredibly dangerous. What should happen in this case? What should we see in the browser if we try to load a page that can't connect to the database? Right. We shouldn't see the error message. We should see this being what we, gracefully handled. So we're going to build an error page, and then we're going to implement some logic that says if any error happens, don't show the message, take the user to an error page. So let's make a new page. New PHP file, which we will call error. At the top of the page, we want to embed our header because the error page, it should still have our navigation bar so the user can move around. It should have our CSS. So we'll set the title. Maybe it says, oops. And then we'll include our header. So we'll just build a general error page. I'll put the code up on Pastebin, but you can put whatever you want on your error page. So we're just going to include the header at the top and put on a red H1 tag with a general message. So our page will look like this. So what should happen is if our connection fails, we should get redirected. Instead of this, we want to see this. So here's what we'll do. So what could we do on our games page so that if anything here, if any of this fails, we take the user off to our error page. We give them this page instead. What could we do on the games page that would check if any of this stuff fails? You guys done any error handling before in any of your other classes, either your programming fundamentals or your JavaScript class? Because it's going to be similar to what you would have done in those languages. Try catch is the answer. So just like we have try catch in Java or in JavaScript, we have it in PHP. So I'm going to take this whole block of code and wrap it in a try catch block. We're going to try to do all this. If we get an error, we're going to catch it, and we want to redirect the user to the error page. That way they will see this and not this. So at the very top, so I'm going to take everything inside my PHP block, and I'm just going to indent it so the code is more readable. And now we're going to add try, and I'm going to open my curly brace at the top. So that's now the first line. So line 9 is new. This is the very first thing inside our PHP code block. So anytime we're trying to connect to the database and work with the data, we should be using a try catch block. So we're going to try all this. I'm going to close my curly brace here, and we're going to catch an exception, which is basically an error, which I will call E, $E. So in this case, redirect to error page instead of showing the error details. We'll use the header location function we've used before to take the user to the error page. So it becomes try with all our code. Oops, I missed a curly brace at the beginning. Sorry about that. So to try this out, here's what I want you to do. Disconnect from the VPN for a minute. So disconnect from the VPN and then click your games link. It's going to try to connect. It'll take a minute. And once the PHP server realizes, that database is offline, I can't reach it, now we get our error page. So I can go home. Home works because it's not using the database. This is just a static page. But when I try to go to games, my connection eventually fails and times out. And I'll get the error page instead. So this is a much better way of handling the error than giving the user this. Now I'm going to want to do the same thing on a few of our other pages, on these three, on delete game, game details, as well as save game. Any one of these. So let's go to delete game. And we're going to do the same thing. Inside of our code that connects to the database and tries to delete a game, we're going to wrap this as well in a try-catch block. For this one, Chris, I want to simulate what you suggested. I want to simulate a typo instead. So I'm going to reconnect to the VPN. But let's say I'm going to modify my SQL command. Let's say we call the table game, singular, which doesn't exist. So this should fail. So now I'm going to take this code and I'm going to try it. And now I'll paste my catch block. So try to connect, try to delete the game and disconnect. But if we have any error, go to the error page. And again, I've changed my delete statement. Instead of the table called games, which exists, I've called it game singular, which doesn't exist in the database. So add your try catch block around this code. Intentionally change the name of your table so it'll cause an error. So now when I go to delete, whoops. Because we've already got another redirect here, we need to stop the execution. So we're going to exit. So nothing else happens. I'll just try that again. That should fix it. So I'm going to delete. And now we go to our error page because we're making an SQL command that's trying to interact with a table that doesn't exist. So this is going to throw an error. I can now fix my code so it will work properly again. So anytime we're connecting to the database, working with data, we should use a try-catch block. I want to go to the save page and do the same thing. So again, we've said if OK is true, connect, do an update or insert. So we're going to use a try here as well. So all this stuff is now inside the try block. Oops. Again, I'll disconnect from the VPN to try this out. So I've added a try right before we connect. And I'm catching any errors down at the bottom. So if I go to, I guess I can't edit it right now because my dropdown won't work. I also want to add the try catch blocks on game details. So here we interact with the database twice. Up at the top, we try this. So when we try to fetch the selected game for editing, again, if we're not connected, we want to get the error page. So I'm disconnected from the VPN. I could try it out. If I go to game details and try to load a game, without the database connection, it should bring me back to the error page. Which it does. And I'll also put a try catch down here in our query for our dropdown. So starting for me on line 55, I'll take our connection, disconnection, and I'll just paste my same catch block in. So I can reuse this catch block. So anytime we're interacting with the database, now we shouldn't add try catch as we're coding. When we're still developing, we want to see the error messages because that'll help us debug them. So we really only add the try catch blocks when we're done our testing and we're sure that our website is working the way we want it to. We then add the try catch blocks. There's one other optional thing you can do with error handling. I'll put it in this. When I work on client sites, I do this. It's not going to work on our AWS web server because we don't have access to the mail server. But if we use the PHP mail function, we could actually send ourselves error messages. So if the message body, we send the error, I'm not going to enable this code. It's not going to work on AWS. But I do this typically with actual client websites. So whenever an error happens, I use try catch to email information about the error to myself. So many times my clients will call me or email me and say, somebody said they got an error on the website. Can you fix it? And I'll say, oh, I fixed it already. Because as soon as it happens, I use a script, a try catch block, to send myself information about the error. And then I can go and say, oh, this website had this error. I can go look it up, try to recreate it, and try to fix it. So I get these error emails coming in. Maybe I even have an example I can show. Let's see. Yeah, so here's one sent to me. So here's the error message. I know which website it was. I know what page the user was on, and that they clicked the save button and generated that error. It's like, oh, okay. Well, this component, which is really old, I guess it doesn't work anymore. So I need to correct it. So this shows up in my inbox as soon as my customer gets it. Or here's one here. Okay, they were supposed to enter a number, but they didn't enter anything. And then I tried to convert, sorry, they left it blank. And then my code tried to convert it to a number. So I would use these error emails. Now this one happened a lot. So then I knew, David, you mentioned validation, right? So input errors, yeah, it could throw errors. So then by emailing them to myself, I see what's going on. So it won't work for us, as I said, on AWS, but on a real website, you can do this. Here's one. Timeout expired. So this let me know, okay, the database was offline. Timeout expired, obtaining a connection. And I know exactly what page the user was on and what they tried to do, and that the database was offline. So this is a really good idea to mail yourself error messages. Okay, I'm going to reconnect to the VPN. So using try catch, it will catch all of these kinds of errors. Database connection errors, syntax errors in our SQL commands, bad data from users that causes problems. Try catch will handle all of them gracefully. What try catch doesn't do, though, is this. So for this, we actually have to handle this in a special way. A 404 not found error when the user requests a page that doesn't exist. So we're going to build a 404 page that's very similar to our error page. And then we need to write a simple configuration file for our Apache web server that will load, instead of loading this, it loads our 404 page. We don't use try catch for this. So we're going to make one last page. Actually, just going to take everything on my error page and copy it. I'm going to make a new page, new PHP file called 404. I'll take out all the HTML, and we can just paste in so our error and 404 pages, they're identical. I'll change the title from oops to not found. And I'll change the message. That'll just say, we can't find that page. Please use a link above, which points them to the navigation bar in the header. I'll put this up on Pastebin. So it's almost the same as our error page. We've just kind of changed the message a little bit. And you can get it to say whatever you want. Sometimes people put, cute graphics in these things. So my 404 page, it looks like this, does not found. But notice the 404 handling, it doesn't happen automatically. Just because I've created a page called 404, the server's not smart enough to know, well, hey, any URLs that don't exist, they should load that 404 page. So we need to build a small, like one line configuration file with a specific name for an Apache web server. And that's going to tell the server anytime in this site there's a URL requested that can't be found, we want to load this instead. This is the last thing we'll do today. Single line of code. So I'm going to make one new file. Make a new file. It's not a PHP file, so just choose new file. The file has a weird name. It's .htaccess. So there's nothing to the left of the dot, unlike most files. If you look in your operating system, it may not even show you this file. It'll consider it a hidden file because of the weird name. So the file's called .htaccess. And in here, we're going to configure an error document. So when we get an HTTP response code 404, which means the requested URL is not found, I think we'll try this. So our path is going to be PHP gaming. We may have to put in a full file path, a full URL, but we're going to try it like this. It's going to go to the root PHP gaming 404.php. I'm going to try this out. So I go to somefile.php. So go to my home page first, so something loads. Blah. So now it takes me to the 404 page. ABC. So any time a 404 error happens, this error document will take me to the 404 page. Now I want to make sure this path is going to work on AWS as well. So I need to make sure my PHP gaming site on AWS is right in the root of public, which it is. So I can try this here as well. So I'm going to upload it all. Now notice my folder is right in public HTML. It's not in a subfolder. If it's in a subfolder, we'll have to change the path. So I'll let it upload all my files. And then I'm going to try my site on AWS and make sure that the 404 error handling works there as well. Because ultimately it needs to work live on the internet. More so than it needs to work on my own computer. So I will go to So notice also by naming our homepage index, this file automatically loads in our folder on the live web server because index is set as the default document. So I can go to games, I can navigate around, all is good, everything's working on AWS. And then if I go to blah, okay, interesting. Our 404 didn't work. Let's see why. My htaccess is here. Might be a path issue. Let's try this. I'm going to try and put in my full path. I may need to do it this way. I think this should work. So I'm going to put in the full path on AWS, https lamp.computerstudies. Okay, yeah, so the relative path, that only works locally. That won't work on AWS. Good to know. So we'll put in the fully qualified path. So this will now handle any 404 requests. So if our database goes offline, we've got try catch blocks. If the user asks for a URL that doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, whatever the extension is, it's going to load our 404. So our site is starting to come together now. We focused in the first half on the class in working with our database and doing create, read, update, and delete. And the latter part of the course is starting to put it all together, so it's starting to become more like a production website where we've used shared components for a global header. We're sharing the database connection globally for efficiency. And now we can handle errors in an appropriate way. Both errors in our code, errors in accessing our server, or 404, which is the most common kind of error. So looking ahead to our next couple of classes, our next piece, which is super important, is going to be looking at security, which is a huge, huge concern and big responsibility if we're going to build websites. Not enough to build attractive, functioning sites. We've got to build secure sites. So we need to start to talk about how we do that. So we're actually going to spend 2 classes on it because it's such an important topic. And there's lots of kind of best practices we need to be aware of. Are there any questions from anybody? Questions, concerns before we wrap up for this week? I'm going to upload all my code now. So you do have a quiz for this week. It's due start a class, on Tuesday at 5 next week. Start a class next week. I'm also going to give out assignment 2. And it's going to be due in 2 parts. You'll have 2 weeks for the first part and 2 more weeks for the second part. So we'll talk about that at the start of class next week. And then we're going to dive into authentication and security with PHP. So all our code from today is on GitHub now. I will upload the videos as soon as WebEx is done processing them.